not live from KKP. We got our Sifu Shagun and me, and our wonderful, wonderful Kung Fu war correspondent, Kwazi.
What's up, guys? What's happening? KungFu Chronicles in the house. Yeah, baby. What's going on? KKP, place to be.
Hey, I like that.
Yeah, what's new? What's happening?
So, welcome back to KKP again. We're just going through this, and of course, one of our you always come up in our conversations very frequently. By the way, all good. All good. All good. Okay, cool. All good because, we're going, as we were talking offline about very pretty people who goes online and they get attracted by that. Gus and I, that's it. This is all we get. This is all people get. It's just me and Gus.
What is what you get? No, and I love that about you guys.
We're a WYSIWYG people.
Yeah, is candy for us, so
as it should be, man. You need a lot of that now, especially when a lot of people are just doing a bunch of stuff where it's just like, okay, that's great and all, but let's talk about the real deal. Let's talk about real martial arts. So
right.
That side of things, we're keeping things real.
Yeah.
Which is a harder conversation to find these days because everybody wants to do. I hate to sound this way. They wants to do. Well, the historical is like, well, this is not 1920 or this is not 1950. We're talking about today, how it should have evolved to handle whatever's thrown at them today. And that's a hard conversation to have these days.
Yeah, but at the same time, I get it. There's a place for the history. You know what I mean? It's like there's a time and place for everything. Not saying you abandon the history, but again, nobody's coming to confront you on a horse. They probably aren't, at least, or with armor and with a battle shield and sword. Those days are long gone. So it's we're talking 2021 where people got guns and knives and have no problem using them, and it's a violent world that we live in. So.
Right.
And I love the traditional stuff. I love all the traditional stuff. I get into it all the time. But martial arts is supposed to be practical.
Yep.
And that's the part that I don't see as much. The practical. I love the history. Actually, I still learn so much today. But I always want to say, well, how is that going to handle this situation? And it doesn't always have to be fighting, but how does it handle? Everyone wants to give me something that I can't lay hands on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Show me a little. So not to interrupt, but when I was interviewing Carl Albright, he had a great quote in there, and he was like, everybody does this stuff, and they tell you, what they're gonna do, how they're gonna do it, and then he was like, that all sounds great, but he's like, my whole thing is because he's from Brooklyn. He's like, but make it work in Brooklyn. It's got to work in Brooklyn, meaning it's got to work on the street. And I love that. And he was just keeping it real back then. Even in the 70s when he was like doing his main time doing martial arts and coming up. He was like, but make it work in Brooklyn. So that's what he would say. And it was like, to me, it's the same thing. Okay, that all sounds great what you're saying, but show me how I can use this in actuality, in real life. Someone's coming at me, how do I disarm them? Go. And
By the way, guys, Kwazi here has this wonderful show called KungFu Chronicles. I want you guys to all check it out. It's really fun and very informative because Kwaz, I mean, what's your basically modus operandi for
so the background on KungFu Chronicles is I really got serious about the channel about a year ago, and let's thank COVID quarantining this pretty much has inspired a lot of people to get up off their butts and do something different. So I thought this would be my give back to the Kung Fu world. I've been training in martial arts 20 plus years, and I've always had a passion to at least, maybe not teach full time, but at least put the information out there. And then also spotlight a lot of instructors and mainly instructors of color that are doing this and doing it well, and giving them a little bit of shine. So I thought that, the channel is just a vehicle to do that, basically. So, started off with interviews and stuff, and now I'm kind of segueing to different things. But that's the gist of it.
Now, here's the other questions. Any revelations?
Oh, a revelation, Jesus. Where do we start? I mean, to be fair, it's good and bad, right? So everyone has their opinions, and I really try to stay objective about it. But I guess revelations would be kind of to Gus's point that there are people that are still kind of like, well, the traditional is the best way, and this is how we came up, and there's still, there's stuff that you can do, and I guess a main revelation would be that forms are fighting, and people's there's a perspective that that's the truth, and I personally don't think so.
Right.
I think there are fighting applications and stuff in forms, but forms are not fighting. So two-man forms, for instance.
There's stuff in there, Kwazi.
What's that?
But there's stuff in there. But there's stuff in there.
But listen, I'm saying there are applications in the forms, definitely, but those alone are not fighting. You're just doing movements, and applications in those forms, and it's a form of repetition, which is great. But just because you learn a form doesn't automatically mean you can fight. Is my point, right?
It's dance.
So there are people that are on that side of the fence and think no, and not saying forms are invalid, because to Gus's point, I love forms as well. I can come in and train forms all day, and mainly weapons, because that's my thing, and be in my happy place. But the reality is, if you learn forms or whatever and go on, and that's all you ever know, it's the whole the concept is like people that do forms all day are great at doing forms. People that do fighting all day are great at doing fighting. So to me, there has to be that middle ground where you do both and are good at both, and that should be what Kung Fu truly is about.
And me, your form should look like you're fighting.
Say again?
For me, your forms should look like you're fighting. Not your forms should not look like kickboxing. There's nothing wrong with kickboxing. Kickboxing is awesome for all you guys who will tell me that they're awesome. It's just that you're learning Spanish, and then you should converse with Spanish, not Yiddish.
Yeah, and it's actually, to bring him up again because he's a really good example. Carl Albright had this whole thing when he was talking to me about how he challenged himself. He would challenge himself to do the specific style and use it fighting. Like when he would be on the fighting circuit, it was like, no, today I'm just using Chole foot. Today I'm just using Hongar. I'm not doing this. So I strayed away from trying to default kickboxing. It was like I'm using stuff from this system.
Awesome. Wow.
So I really appreciated that. And his main style is Mantis, but he was like, I would use these pieces of the style when I would fight. And you can even see it when you see the videos of him doing the old school, when they would just do kind of bare knuckle or whatever stuff. And, he's really trying to use the system. So there are not that many people doing that, to your point. But also when you look at it, even when you go to China, their default is Sanda. So that's a form of kickboxing. It's still, but my point is, you don't go to the Shaolin Temple. They're doing these Shaolin forms and stuff, and everyone's flipping and flipping off their heads and stuff, and breaking knives on their foreheads. But then when the fighting comes, it's Sanda. Yeah. So I like that, but they're not doing 5 animal forms when they're fighting. So I don't know. It kind of it's a cool down thing, right?
Yep.
So
yep. Exactly.
Even the greats in Shaolin at the Shaolin Temple aren't doing that, then how are we expecting people in the mainland to preserve that, right?
I mean, Gus always gets, and please chime in, Gus, about one of the things I can't say. I love history, like Gus says, but when people hide behind your ancestors, his name, and just name drop, it's like, who cares? The guy's been dead for like 500 years,
No, it's actually funny you say that. So, when my Qigong came to, I'm trying to think whose the story comes from. I'm gonna do the story maybe a little bit wrong, but I think it was one of my training brothers' schools down in, maybe it was like Florida or something. They had my grandmaster come out to visit. And like the Sifu instructor was so proud of like he had everything, like all the stuff up, at the altar and everything. Oh, Qigong, look here. I'm honoring this point. He's like, and then he goes, like, my Qigong is like, kind of speaks broken English. It's always funny, so I imitate him a little bit. He's like, why you have them? They all dead. I hear. Why do you have all those guys up there? Who cares about them? They're gone.
Right.
It's like, do a little tribute, but you don't need this whole fancy altar with all the dead people on it.
It's kind of, I regard it as like a founder, right? Gus. I mean, Gus gets that all the time.
And that comes from an old school traditional Kung Fu master, so if he can say it, I mean, and then fast forward, I'll give you the second part of that. When we, myself and my other Sifu, Sifu Julio Perez, we opened our school in Brooklyn 10 years ago. It was like 2010 or 2009. My Sifu from California came to help us because he's more really business savvy. And the first thing he said, he goes to the school and sits us down and goes, okay, so first thing, guys, get rid of all the dead people. Like, just take all the pictures down of the dead folks. It's not doing any good. So it's like, it's funny how that sentiment is, and it's true. It's like, what are you doing? You're holding on to the past. We get it, but in your school, it's like, come on.
Yeah, honor what they did, but you know, don't worship.
Right. They're not deities. They're old, like old school, either founders or practitioners, and that's great. But again, you don't have to platform.
But if people want to worship us, it's fine.
There you go.
We're still alive.
There you go. That's all good. I know a lot of people are worshiping you guys. KKP comments, I see it all the time. I'm like, all right.
Some strange comments.
Yeah, I think we call that worship.
Yeah.
It's something.
Definitely. I would equate it to they would throw the peaches at us.
Right. You see that peach? That's the one that the monkey stole.
Oh no, those hairy peaches.
Exactly. So here's a question going back. I want to go back to the state of Kung Fu. So, because I'm seeing some Sifus who are really working their butts off, producing good quality students. And my thing is, Kung Fu is known for its quality, right? Speaking of historical, when you look back from a history standpoint, whatever they produced good quality. If it was performers, they produced great performers. If they produced fighters, they produced great fighters. I don't know if students today know where they are. Why do you think that is?
That's a good one. I think it's back to the point, though. It's back to the instruction, right? The students can only be as good as the instructor. So if the instructor's not really focused in on like making you the best student you can be or giving you as much knowledge as possible, you're gonna falter. You're gonna not be that complete student. And sometimes it's a matter of, let's face it, some people just have way too many students. It's like, and they're trying to do a little bit too much. So they give this guy 10% of this, 2% of this chick, this guy's got 5%. And then between all of them, they know the system, but everybody's got a portion, right?
A little bit, right.
So yeah, there's a lot of those guys. And then there are people, also the flip side, these Sifus that believe in, but I'm going to give you a little bit, but I got to hold back because you got to earn this. So I'm going to hold everything back. And then it's like, but the point is to propagate your system. And if you keep holding back, sorry, tomorrow's not promised. God forbid you slip on a banana peel, knock your head on the wall, and you're gone, and you held back, and your students only got this much. Now they can't pass it.
Right.
So there's like two trains of thought there that they kind of stifle things, but sure.
And here's a question. I don't see any, we call it sensao, I don't see any real combat. Now I know you're practicing a lot of combat these days. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that we don't see, because people are like, well, this is what I would do, and this is an application, but it's like an application is not combat.
That's not combat. Oh. That's not, that is, come on, there's some stuff in there, Gus. Come on.
We've had people come on the village floor before, and they're like, oh, I want to show you this, and I want to show you that, and I want to show you that. And then we make them do it in a context, right? And then they can't pull it off the way that they thought they were going to pull it off. And I don't know why. What would happen? Because there was a time when it was Kung Fu specifically was combative. What do you think in 2021? What do you think happened? Now everyone is kind of, ooh, I see the jiu-jitsu people doing that, and I'm gonna steal that. Now I see the Muay Thai people stealing that. It's like, no. Historically, if your art survived, it came from combat. So where is it? I just don't see it. I wonder why.
Well, I think it's like it goes back to that, what's the Tyson quote? Everybody's got an answer until they get hit, or you know what I mean? It's like that whole thing. We all talk about it, but once you get hit, it's real. And I think the majority of people, let's face it, they come into Kung Fu schools, martial arts schools in general, really don't. Most of us aren't violent in nature, so you're not coming from straight off the block. I got that old school gangster mentality where I'm ready to jack people up. You're coming from, like you're a business person or you just work at freaking Walmart or whatever you do day to day. So you don't have that mentality. So when you get hit at first, it's a shock, right? So a lot of people go through that. And I think Sifus and instructors, they go, all right, if I keep letting my students get that hardcore training, they're going to quit. So some people are, like scared of that. But it's also the reality is like, so I think that reality factor, a lot of people just don't want to get hit. And we always have to remember that people come to martial arts or for martial arts training for different reasons. Some people just want the health benefits. They just want to exercise. They just want to, have, the fancy pajamas on and, look great in the mirror with the weapons and stuff and then say they're this. But then other people really want to get in. No, I want to learn how to defend myself. So it's kind of a mixed bag. Yeah. And I think that's why, yeah.
I've had martial arts. I mean, we've had the village for 23 years now, and I've had martial artists come in who've never trained in combat, but they always assume they've trained in combat. And I think that's a little dangerous because I don't want these people to get into an altercation that they're not prepared for. Because as a martial artist, we're prepared to fight, but we shouldn't always be looking to always use our kung fu, right? But we should always be prepared. And I've gotten people come in before and they're like, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I'm like, oh, wonderful. Absolutely. I'm looking forward to learning, And then when they can't do it because they're under pressure, then they're a little taken back by that. And I'm like, but you didn't train for 2 years or even 8 years. You've trained for 15, 20 years. And why didn't you learn that? Because now it becomes a common sense thing, I think, after a while. The news tells us enough that you see people get attacked all the time. It's like, I always tell my students, I go, what would you do in that scenario? Forget about what I'm doing in this. What would you do in that scenario? And I don't know if that's being presented. Ignorance is bliss. That's what I found and especially in Kung Fu now, because I know a lot of people aren't going to like that. But I've interacted with so many people who, gosh, Sifu Gus, I never learned that aspect before. I go, you realize it's a fight. You realize,
Well, yeah, and to your point, I think that we kind of, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us go through this kind of like revelation where you may train for a while and then realize, and I don't know when it happens for certain people, but I remember I had my reality check years ago at this tournament where I think at that point I'd already been doing Kung Fu for like, say, 3 or 4 years. And I finally was up to the advanced level where I could compete advanced. And I remember this guy just clocked the crap out of me. And he like clocked me full blast. And then he like swept me like two-legged sweep off the ground. I was on my back and I was like, oh my God, I was not ready. And that's when I wait, I learned all this stuff. Wait, what happened? Like, where am I? But I think that's when the aha moment for me hit is like, wait, I gotta really start focusing more on what's important. And to me, it was like, if I can't defend myself, and this is like, it's an environment where you've got rules, you got a judge, and luckily they stop the fight for a minute, you're good and all that. But in the street, I would have been jacked up. Who's to say I would have gone home that day?
Right.
So I think that was the light bulb. Was like, yeah, I got to really start focusing on the fighting aspects and the the things in the system, the meat of it, like I would say. So for us, for Northern Eagle Claw specifically, it's those 108 locking, all that chin na. So I really set a goal to get really good at that. But then also I started to branch out. Even when I got to back to New York, I started looking for, other styles that could complement mine. Not saying mine wasn't great, but maybe I wasn't getting enough on the teaching side. I never blamed the style. I always kind of blamed the teachers. And it's not to throw shade on anybody, but I feel like if you're not getting enough of what you want, then you got to look elsewhere. And there's nothing wrong with that. There are plenty of people that cross-train. For me, that was just the way I went, and I don't regret doing that. But for some people, if you find it all in your system and you're a badass, then hey, more props to you. Bless your heart. You know what I'm saying? But that just wasn't my road. So, like I said, that's when I started to, and I'm glad it happened. You know what? It's like every time something like that will happen, you have your clock clean or whatever, you go, first of all, I get it because anyone can get it any other day of the week. But if that's the thing that is your catalyst to wanting to get better, then so be it. And I've always stayed humble because of that. So I think more people need to do that. I don't think enough people are exposed where they're in those situations where maybe even their instructors even let them, go at those 80% levels. It's like, yes, we want to keep it safe, but reality is if this is a real fight, we have to pressure test this stuff. We have to see if it's going to work. And by the way, what works for you may not work for me and vice versa. So we have to see, in this case, if this application will work for you, maybe not. Maybe you got to use something different. You got to find what works. And that's why you have to keep pressure testing your stuff.
I love fun. I used to get so many times. I still get these after a UFC fight or some sort of fight happened online. They always kind of go, "What if I meet somebody like that?" And I always tell them, "You will lose. Those are gladiators." If you train like them, maybe, but you're like what you said. You're going to work every day, and your thing is protect yourself and your loved one, and that's it. There's no mano y mano thing here. You know, always bring a gun to a knife fight. You know,
right.
So,
but it's interesting you say that, because now Sifu Gus will attest to this also. A video he sent me a while ago, when I first really got hip to Tim Larkin, he sent me this video about the 3 MMA guys. They go into this gas station, and you know they're badasses, but they're messing with this one chick, and there's this bunch of guys that come in. I guess she's part of their crew, and a fight ensues inside the gas station. And in the gas station, MMA guys knocking these dudes out like it's nothing, because they do this all the time in the ring. They go outside where all of them can spread out, and the one guy's so focused on pummeling this other guy that he doesn't even realize his friend's coming up with a 2x4 and blocks him over.
Right.
So the point being, back to my point, is anyone can get it, even MMA fighters. Right. It's like you're not more than likely not going to meet up with those guys on the street.
Correct.
Because it's the old adage is that most people don't go looking for trouble, and the ones that do usually find it anyway. But the bigger point is, when you're fighting too in that sport frame, you're always thinking there's a ref to cut things off. There's rules. Exactly. So even in your mind, it's 1-on-1. But reality says, on the streets, it can be 5-on-1, 4-on-1. If you've ever gotten jumped on, I hope you haven't. It sucks, because it's you against, more than one person, and you're just trying to get out of there. You're not trying to do anything fancy.
Yeah.
So
we came from that neighborhood, me and Gus. We came from that neighborhood.
You can be a professional fighter and still get jacked up if you're not really training with the mindset of, I've got to take it to a super hot level to be able to stay safe on the streets.
Yes. Right.
And I've heard people say, martial artists, seasoned martial artists, goes, the person who jacked me the most was a schizophrenic, bipolar, meth addict, old lady swung and just hit me one time. I wasn't prepared for it.
Right.
And I tell people, I'm of the fact I judge a fruit by the tree it bears. So when people are like, well, I do this, I do that, and I'm like, okay, that's great. You're good, you're talented, you've trained for a long time. What is your students doing? And that's why, Kwazi, even when you came to the village, I had you work with the girls, and I said, talk to them, because I'm not going to sit there and overbear them. If I do, then I am questioning actually what I have taught them. And when Ron comes in, Ron goes and trains with them. He helps them. And the reality at the end of the day is, if you're bearing bad fruit, then that could be dangerous. Because they don't know any better.
And I think it's also the responsibility, it's a great point. I think it's a responsibility of us as instructors too, because not to give people false senses of security. That's one of the main thrusts when I'm teaching. It's like, listen, we can show you guys this stuff, but it's up to you to take this material seriously, because it could possibly one day save your life. And if you're not going to train at this level and think it's just going to kick in like a light switch one day, then you're fooling yourself. Right. And I, as an instructor, would hate it. I wouldn't even know how to live with myself or sleep well at night if I heard one of our students got, really, really hurt or injured or, God forbid, killed because of some bullshit we taught them. Yeah. Basically, excuse my French. But so that's why I'm always looking at that. And I can't believe that a lot of instructors are out there going, oh no, the monkey steals the peach crap and crouching tiger stuff is really going to work for you. It's like, no, be honest about that. If you're teaching self-defense, you have, it's on you. You're basically almost at like this higher calling where you've got to teach legit stuff, because this stuff, the students are going to take it as the gospel truth. Like, it's going to work. It's going to work because my instructor said so. Okay, but when you got to feel responsible if something happens to your student.
But you have to remember, there's more money in teaching monkey steals the peach.
Okay, but yeah, to your point, which is true, teach monkey steals the peach, crouching tiger, but then put the caveat, but this is just entertainment, this is just sport, this is just whatever.
Teach it in your tiny tots class. That's what you teach. That's when you teach it.
However you want to label it, but be responsible enough to say that and admit that. I have no problem with a all-form school if that's what you want to do, but let people know out the gate, this is not what you're going to do in a real life situation, because more than likely you'll get your ass kicked if you try this. And just be honest about it. That's all I would say. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I've learned that the less people know about combat, when I've interacted with them, the more cocky they are. When people who are really good at it,
Yeah, they don't say much.
You don't know until you start interacting with them. I get it. I've seen it in karate. I've seen it in kung fu, and I'm like, do you realize how dangerous it is? Do you realize how if you're dealing with someone who just got out of prison, you get in their face like you're gonna kick their butt? You realize what could possibly take place here, and that's dangerous. That's dangerous. But like I said, we at the Village has been in business 23 years, and the reality at the end of the day is we don't have a large school. We've never had a large school because we hit. You get to know exactly where you are and what you need to work on, and that doesn't make people feel good. I have friends of mine who have schools, and they're at 200, 300, 400 students, and their students all feel good, and they all get a good sweat after class. And I'm like, that's good,
right? And it's not wrong, but again, be honest about what we're doing.
Right.
This is just cardio kickboxing. This is just a road. It's like interesting now because you guys know I also train in Krav Maga now. So we always stamp things with, listen, we're not doing cardio kickboxing here, guys. Yes, we're going to warm up, stretch you out. You're going to get a good workout. But our main thrust here is self-empowerment, your self-defense, being aware, teaching you things like that. But if that's not what you're teaching in your martial arts school, just make people aware of that, because I think, again, as an instructor, you have that responsibility. The onus is on you. I don't know how instructors can sleep well at night if, like I said, God forbid your student is injured. How crappy would you feel? Maybe some wouldn't, but I would think people that are more on the human side would at least be like, damn, I should have, been more honest about that, because now my student's jacked up. And back to your other point before, it's a great point, Sifu, because I'm more, I shouldn't say afraid, but I'm more wary of people that aren't martial arts trained that do more damage, because to your point, I saw like a regular, not even a huge buff dude, but this guy on the train arguing with the homeless guy because, he didn't want to give the homeless guy money. And maybe it was the homeless guy's last time that he'd heard, kind of get away from me. He kind of just was like, yeah, get out of here. The guy clocked the dude in the face. I'll never forget, on the subway train, the guy dropped like that because he hit him square in the face. And the guy literally, he was a big dude. It wasn't small. It was, like maybe 200 pounds. The homeless guy was maybe like 120, maybe like 140. So average was like skinny, lanky dude, but popped the guy in the face, just one hit, the guy slumped down, and it was a wrap. I was like, wow, the guy was cold cock knocked out. Just that.
And I think that when you're teaching fighting, you're teaching how to deal with violence. And if you're teaching a sport, let them know that this is a sport. That you're teaching in a safe environment. Yeah, you can get knocked out or you can get hit or hurt, but it's still a safe environment. When you're dealing in the elements, when you're on a subway or you're in the street, you're going to your car, you're dealing with violence. No one comes up to you in your car and wants to spar with you. They want to take something or take you. It's only one of two things that they are going to do. Now, we just saw an example in LA where the guy in Gardena just walked with the girl and just started punching her.
Yeah.
And this guy was 300 plus pounds, and the woman didn't even see it coming. She was just looking down. And I go, if you're training in martial arts, you have a responsibility. If you're teaching them how to fight, you have a responsibility to at least teach them how to run. All my students did the exact thing about that scenario. They go, she should just pour gas on him. That's what they all say, because we talk about these scenarios,
Right, but that's also part of it's not just training people to fight, self-defend, but also situational awareness has to be part of that game as well. If you're too busy on your phone, or you're too busy with your headphones, or reading whatever, or in the paper, whatever, you're opening yourself up to a scenario possibly where you could get injured just because you're not being aware. For years when I was living back in New York, it was like, and it's not to the point where you're paranoid. It's like, yeah, I'm going to be on the train looking at my paper and stuff, but I always got to, it's like the old saying is like, I sleep with one eye open. So it's like, I'm reading the paper with one eye on the paper and one eye on my peripheral. So there should always be that kind of awareness because you just don't know. And the people that are just like going about their business like da-di-da-di-da, those are the people that the quote unquote bad guys are looking for. Because at the end of the day, we always have things like bad guys are lazy. They're not looking to fight big buff dudes that just came out the pen. They're looking to fight the little 110-pound woman or the 120-pound guy that's just, walking to work and minding his business, and they can just take the wallet, take the purse, and leave.
Right. I mean, I always tell people whenever I do self-defense, you need two senses to actually focus first. So if you're just like you just said, just going along, that's the first rule of self-defense is awareness.
Yeah. Situational awareness.
And like, you know, we were talking about, you know, how people are tough and everything else. Yeah, there's a lot of people, like SOV. Take away all his martial arts, he's still a tough man. You know, he can still kick ass. You know, but now he's more efficient and more, you know, better. And yeah, just trying to push people out of the gate. You know, you did your 400 kicks, now you're black belt. Oh, that's just sad.
Yeah, well, again, it's like you're a product of your environment. Back to what you were saying about SOV. Some people come into the game and they've got that background. Like, I didn't come into martial arts with a big fighting background, but I got into scraps when I was a kid, so it wasn't like shocking when I got punched in the face for real the first time. It sucks, but it wasn't like, oh my God, I can't take it, I gotta quit.
Oh yeah, it sucks.
But then some instructors, their reaction to that is, oh, okay, well, you won't have to fight again. And you're not doing your student you're doing them a service. You're not doing them a favor.
Right.
So again, it's like, I'm not a big businessman, so I know there's a balance there, and you've got to keep people in and not scare them away. But the reality of things are, like you're saying, it's like, in a violent world, if you're going to teach it, you've got to teach people how to be a little violent to trump other violence.
Right. I mean, I always tell people is if your teacher or school gives you a disadvantaged rule when it comes to combat, that's competition.
Yeah.
Like, you cannot go out of this ring. You cannot stab the guy. You cannot use an anvil to hit over his head. Stuff like that. I mean, you were saying, Gus?
Yeah, absolutely. No. I think it's important to understand. And going back to what you were saying, Kwazi, it's important to know where you are. So if you're listening to this and you're training, I hope you'll get the right answer. But you have to use a little common sense. And the common sense is this. It's if your instructor says, no, we're learning fighting, look at the majority of the training time on the floor. It will link up to exactly what he says or she says. Because the reality is, if you do fighting once a month and you do everything else for the rest of the month, you're not in a fighting school. You're in a school that fights, but you're not in a fighting school. And you need to, and that's just the truth. And because you're not going to get it organically. I watched a guy one time, he was just a human bongo. I watched him, but he didn't practice fighting. He sparred sometimes, but he was a human bongo because he didn't know how to fight. Yeah. You know, and he wasn't athletic to be able to get himself out of things. He just was getting beat the whole time. But he walked away, got his black belt, and says, well, I'm a good fighter. And I'm like, you're a good get hitter.
You're a good punching bag? You got a black belt being a punching bag? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. So I just think it's important. And Kung Fu, and this may be a shock to some people when I say this, Kung Fu doesn't have a reputation for fighting. And I just don't understand that. I don't understand that. I do understand it.
I don't think it's a shock anymore. You know what I will say is like as we're wrapping it up, every time I ask people the question, because I do keep that one question no matter who I interview, it's like the MMA versus Kung Fu controversy. Why do you think it is Kung Fu practitioners get a bad rep for not fighting? I mean, it's out there. If you look at all the Zhizhadong videos where he goes and he challenges all these Kung Fu guys, he's knocking these guys out in less than 20 seconds because he's coming from that fight mentality, and these old school guys are doing all this traditional stuff. And to Tipu Ron's point, they're going into a gunfight with a knife. So what do you expect? It's unfortunate, but the martial has kind of been taken out of the art over the years, and it's been like saturated. And now we're stuck with a lot of these guys teaching, just basic stuff that's really, like we say, it's like you've learned just enough to get your ass kicked. It's like you really haven't gotten into the crux of the system and the fighting aspects of it.
So, and my take on it, they're all monkey still peach systems until, they're all monkey still peach systems until you actually teach something that someone can. I mean, when the instructor goes, well, I can, I go, okay, I don't disagree with that. I want to see your highest black belt or your highest sash do it. Right? I want to see them do it. When they can't do it, then it ain't being taught. Yeah. You might have gotten it, but they're being influenced by you. I've run a lot of students out of here, not intentionally, but because I gave them my best, and when they, because of course they want to learn the da-da-da-da-da, and I give it to them, and then we don't see them come. They all start making excuses on why they can't come to class anymore. But I'm not going to be, an instructor friend of mine said, Gus, he goes, you know what your problem is that you teach from your heart. He said, you're either going to be written or right. And I go, I guess I'm going to be right then, because I'm not going to be rich doing what I do. Because his philosophy is that you keep teaching the way you're teaching, you're not going to make money doing it.
Right.
And I'm like, 23 years later, I'm like, I understand what he was saying. I get it, you know.
And to be fair, there are, because even in my system, when I came into Eagle Club, there were definitely masters and instructors that I would look to and be like, oh, he's legit. He can really handle himself, or she can really handle herself. And then there were the others where it was like, oh, okay, it's like, yeah, you can see like that part, they'd instruct the fighting part in their training. So my point is, the material is in the system. It's just whether people want to take the time and really train it, or if they get scared away and go, but that's not really me. I'm just going to stick to the forms and the meditation and the Tai Chi. It's what I like. So again, people come to martial arts for different reasons, and being objective now, I guess, back to the point where you guys were asking me like any revelations, it's like having that open mind to know that, and I get that. But again, as the instructor, you've got to at least put it out there in the beginning. This is mainly a form school, or this is, if you want self-defense, maybe, you should go somewhere else, or you go to this place, or, because I actually had an interview with Alex Richter, who's a Wing Chun guy. And he says, sometimes people come in and was like, I want to learn this and this takedown, or this and this, and it's a lot of UFC stuff. And I'll tell him, hey, great, go to the UFC school, because I don't do that. And I really respected him saying that. He's like, like school owner, you would think, oh, great, we teach that here, come on in. But there are some legitimate instructors that go, well, that's not what I teach you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Well,
I've run instructors the same way.
Yeah. We gotta wrap things up, guys.
Yeah.
Sorry. But I'd like to put out one more question. So what's next in the future in Chronicles?
Well, we've like I said, I've got a few other interviews coming up. I think you guys will like. I just talked to a guy who does style of Kung Fu that's out in Israel that basically says Wu Wei Kung Fu. It's very interesting. It marries along the lines. It has a lot of similarities with Krav Maga. He's doing it out in Israel. He actually featured on this Netflix show called Fight World. And if you haven't checked it out, it's with the guy Frank Grillo, who's been in the Marvel movies and a lot of other movies. But it's a really good series, like 6 episodes. They span different parts of the world, and Frank Grillo goes to check out different styles. So when he went to Israel, he checked this guy's school out. So I got a chance to interview him. You're going to see a couple other cool interviews coming up I think you'll like. Also, we started branching off into feature called Debunk the Junk, which myself and Sifu Gus and people with the village, we're looking at women's self-defense techniques and kind of breaking them down, what works, what doesn't. And so hopefully we can do a couple of more of those episodes, wink, wink. Yeah, but that's really what they're on. Yeah, you hear that? Right? I'm just saying. They've gotten really good feedback, so I know we're on to something there. And I enjoy doing that because it helps us as instructors, too, to be a little more critical and be like, it's not that, like crap on anybody, but especially when it's back to that responsibility. When you're teaching self-defense, make sure this stuff can really work and you don't get somebody injured. So that's what we've got to expect coming up soon. And,
cool.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Coming up in August.
Oh yeah,
workout.
Yes. Yeah, we're down.
Closed door invitationals for experts that have open minds.
Is this an invitation? Yeah, your open invitation to more Sifus and instructors to come out to the workout?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
They're good.
We reached out to a few more, and they were really up for it. And if this works well, we'll invite more in.
Nice.
Yeah, some of you guys know them pretty well, and all we ask for is just an open mind and leave the bad ego. Bring the good ego, and bad ego we just kind of like, oh God.
Now here's one question as we wrap up. Are you gonna film the workout and put it online afterwards?
Pictures.
Or Pictures. Okay. Pictures. All right, that's fair.
Now they could film themselves.
Okay. Cool.
Because this is not social media. This is martial arts, and we want to get these guys. To, and everybody in this group that we're doing to be comfortable and to really just be able to handle the martial arts. And then from there, I was like, oh, we should do this. For me, I don't care. I know Ron don't care. I know you don't care. But at the end of the day, we want everyone to feel comfortable. And this is not going to be that the spotlight's going to be on them and their camera's going to be on them. If we want to do interviews afterwards and talk about what we thought, you know, for our shows, and I'm okay with that.
Right.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Good.
All right. Thanks, Kwaz. And always been a pleasure. And we're going to see each other personally soon.
Right back at you guys. I appreciate it.
All right, brothers.
All right, brothers.
Good seeing you.